On a Sunday evening, Jeanette proposed that we engage in a serious discussion. This was not entirely unexpected, given her peculiar behavior throughout the weekend. I had observed her demeanor and inquired about her well-being, but she asserted that she was merely preoccupied. I, too, was preoccupied with concerns related to the economic downturn, which had significantly impacted our financial stability. The financial landscape had undergone a significant transformation, evolving from one of promise to one of struggle. We were no longer sailing smoothly, instead, we were barely keeping our heads above water. It wasn't just us, our peers were facing similar challenges. Jeanette, however, was grappling with this setback in a distinctive manner. Having grown up with limited resources, she had become accustomed to the comforts we once enjoyed, such as our annual vacations. While she never directly blamed me, her subtle comments during our financial discussions, Jeanette's frustration was palpable. I embraced her and expressed my love for her, but she did not reciprocate. Instead, she took a strong shot of scotch without offering me any. I sensed that she had something important and troubling to tell me and that she was gathering the courage to start the conversation. After dinner, we sat in front of the TV in silence for the rest of the evening. I was unable to recall what shows were on. The television programs were the sole focus of my attention, and my thoughts were preoccupied with Jeanette. Instead of our customary practice of viewing the news before engaging in sexual intercourse, we observed a notable degree of tension. The financial crisis had adversely impacted our intimate life, as it had affected numerous other aspects of our lives. As I completed my dental hygiene routine, Jeanette entered the bathroom and abruptly revealed that I had been extended an invitation to a complimentary skiing excursion in Colorado. A colleague had initially accepted the invitation but was subsequently unable to attend, resulting in the unclaimed tickets. Refundable. We're leaving Wednesday morning and returning Monday. I rinsed my mouth and responded, "That's an interesting way to put it. It sounds like it was a man who asked you." Jeanette looked incredibly guilty. "You've answered my question, so who is the guy from work who invited you, a married woman, on vacation?" I tried to keep my composure. "You don't know him," she replied. "I thought I knew everyone you worked with." Jeanette was confused and said that someone from work had invited her on vacation. I pointed out that she had said, "someone at work," to which she protested, saying, "Okay, enough with the word games." I then asked who the man was who had invited her. She replied that he was a man she had met in the office cafeteria. His office was on the 5th floor, and we had had lunch together a few times. I tried to maintain my composure, but I was visibly upset. I asked how long she had been seeing him. Jeanette began to cry. She said, "I would never cheat on you." I was hurt by her implication that I had forgotten something important. I informed her that I had been having lunch with another man. Furthermore, he had invited her, a married woman, to go skiing in Colorado with him. Additionally, we had not engaged in sexual intercourse for almost a month. I asserted that these circumstances were indicative of the situation. She countered that he was a pleasant individual, but his girlfriend had terminated their relationship, and he was reluctant to forfeit the opportunity. She elaborated that the expenses had already been covered, including the hotel, lift tickets, and so forth. I retorted that this was fortuitous. She then inquired about his surname, inquiring whether JN had a last name. I inquired as to whether Johnson or Jackson had a last name. "Your distress at the situation has impaired your ability to think clearly. You have agreed to fly across the country with a man whose last name you do not even know." I then asked whether you were either having an affair with him or were incredibly naive. The argument intensified, and I demanded to know who the other friends were who would be sharing the cabin with you. She replied that there were 2 other couples. "Therefore, you are going as his date." I then accused her of lying, stating that he does not want to waste the non-refundable ticket. She then proceeded to explain the details of the refundable ticket. In response, I inquired as to why I should trust her. She then asked me if I would trust her if she told me that she had met a woman in the cafeteria and that this woman had invited her on vacation. I was incredulous and responded that I remembered how jealous she had become when I was talking to a woman at the ballpark. "Summer, that was a different situation." She protested, stating that I was ignoring her and that I would not be ignoring her when I am in a cabin with John and 4 strangers. I then pointed out that Jeanette became enraged and stormed out of the room. It was a long, sleepless night, during which we both tossed and turned until approximately 2 a.m. At 00 in the morning, when exhaustion finally overtook us, I arose at 06. At 6 a.m., I prepared a pot of coffee. Jeanette took one sip, threw it in the sink, and stated that she was going to work. At that moment, I realized that when my wife was determined to adhere to her position, acknowledging her mistake was not an option. She was the most obstinate individual I had ever encountered. As I drove to work, I devised a plan to salvage my marriage. I recognized that relying on logic alone would not resolve this situation. A more forceful approach was required, as my grandmother used to say about a year ago. I took a risk by hiring a street-smart young man who had served time in county jail for robbing a convenience store. He often reminded me that he owed me big time for giving him a chance after his release. "You name it, boss, and I'll do it," he would say. I decided to cash in on that favor. Julio, I requested his assistance, informing him that I would provide the necessary resources and support. Julio responded by outlining the circumstances and providing a photograph of his wife and the address of her workplace. I requested that he take a discreet photograph of the individual named John when he was present at the aforementioned location. I then instructed him to follow the subject and ascertain his whereabouts. "Where does he work at the end of the day? Tail him and get his license plate number." I added, "You got it, boss. Don't worry about my time card. I'll take care of it," Julio assured me as I waited anxiously. I kept glancing at my watch, convinced that Jeanette was meeting her boyfriend to badmouth me despite being buried in work. Time seemed to crawl by on that typical Monday at 1 o'clock. At 10 o'clock, my phone rang. "Boss, it's me." I obtained the photograph. Julio reported that they were conversing, but I was unable to discern the content of their discussion. Subsequently, I accompanied him into the elevator. He did not acknowledge me when he exited. I feigned searching for a room number. He proceeded to enter Suite 510, a location designated as Anderson Meter Supplies LLC. "Excellent work, Julio. However, you have only achieved half of your objective," I stated with assurance after concluding the call. I accessed Google on my computer, though I was not particularly optimistic. I began entering variations of JHJC, but none of the results matched the photograph. I then investigated Anderson Meter Supplies LLC and discovered that they were a prominent supplier of powdered metals in the industry. However, they did not have any employee names or photos available online. Consequently, I called their number and inquired about John Johnson. The individual in question was not known to the establishment. The representative apologized and terminated the call. I then attempted to identify the individual in question by cross-referencing various databases. However, I was unsuccessful. I then proceeded to the restroom to consider my options. Jackson Johnson, the individual in question, entered the premises ostensibly to smoke. Julio revealed that he had not seen the individual in question. I inquired as to whether he had been present when the individual entered the premises. Julio replied in the negative, stating that he had been preparing to light a cigarette when the individual entered. Julio then informed me that the individual's name is Robert Jensen. Julio described Jensen as a disagreeable individual. Julio then informed me that Jensen had taken a cigarette from him. I commended Julio for his resourcefulness. Unfortunately, I was unable to pursue the matter further due to the onset of a logistics meeting. I was unable to conduct further research until the end of the workday. Julio contacted me as I was parking in the garage. He informed me that Jensen had departed the office at approximately 3 p.m. and taken the subway. I followed him to his residence, which was located near Logan Square. It was a basement apartment at 2366 North Kimball Avenue. The apartment was in a state of disrepair, with burglar bars installed on the windows but no curtains. I remained in the vicinity to ascertain whether he had visited any other locations. Approximately 10 minutes later, he emerged with a stack of pizza boxes and discarded them into the He then proceeded to deposit a garbage cart into the receptacle. After returning to the interior of the residence, he retrieved 2 sizable garbage bags. I promptly retrieved both bags. This is illustrative of the manner in which individuals engage in identity theft, discarding a considerable quantity of valuable items. I am unaware of the identity Robert Jensen, but I have discovered a number of official appearing documents bearing the name Jackson Johnson. Julio has commended my efforts. I believe we should discuss this matter further tomorrow. Very well, Julio. The information I have gathered has provided me with a potential avenue of inquiry. I entered the residence and observed. Janine was observed consuming a meal of hamburger and fries at the kitchen table. She had not provided me with any items. I proceeded to lay out my demands for a rational discussion, which she ignored. Jeanette attempted to interject, but I instructed her to wait until I had finished speaking. I am not unaware of the circumstances surrounding your vacation plans. I recall how you phrased them to make me believe you were going with a coworker. It is now time for full disclosure. I stated firmly that I require Jay's last name and address. I requested the email address, cell number, and workplace of the individual in question, as well as copies of the plane tickets and the mountain cabin rental address. Without this information, I would be unable to ascertain the location and identity of the individual in the event of an emergency. The individual responded with a dramatic tone, stating, "Don't be so dramatic." I persisted, emphasizing the necessity of providing the names and contact information of the other couples involved. The individual then revealed that the cabin in question does not belong to him, but rather to his uncle. Additionally, the individual, who goes by the initials, JN, stated that he does not possess a cell phone. I would like to request that you provide me with the following information. I noted that many individuals in their later years have access to cellular phones. She responded in a defensive manner, indicating that he did not possess one. I inquired as to whether, once I had gathered the information I sought, she would cease to be subjected to pressure and be permitted to enjoy herself. She then brightened up, flashing a smile, and stated that I had only one day to obtain the information I sought. She then asked me to admit that I was jealous of her. I was visibly upset. I slammed my fist on the table and exclaimed, "I am not jealous. I am upset because in all the time we have been together, you never mentioned skiing once. Now, suddenly, you want to go skiing in Colorado with some guy you met in the cafeteria. One might inquire as to why I suspect something untoward." "I swear I'm not," she protested. "Just procure the information if it is found to be accurate, and we will engage in discourse." I was tempted to inform her that her partner utilized a fictitious name, but I desired to observe Jensen's reaction first. We slept as far apart as the Queen. Jeanette was civil the following morning, and we even shared coffee. I arrived at the office early, pacing anxiously until Julio arrived. Jeanette was leaving soon, and this was my last opportunity to salvage our marriage. Julio brought a large cardboard box to work. He had sorted through the bags, separating the garbage from the important items. These included financial records, bank statements, and legal mail. Julio tore open the envelopes, seemingly unaware that this would not deter identity theft. I carefully reassembled any important documents and organized them. The first item he handed me was a legal-sized envelope addressed to Robert Jensen. An envelope, of a larger size than usual, addressed to Robert Jensen was also present. It transpires that Jensen is being taken to court for failing to pay child support. He has 2 young children and has not paid anything for over a year. Julio then produced a bench warrant for missing court due to non-payment of child support. He explained that the police are too busy to visit people at home, so they put your name on the system if they catch you. For even a minor infraction such as a traffic citation, the individual may be incarcerated. This was met with a degree of mirth. Subsequently, there were numerous overdraft notices and bounced checks from a financial institution in San Francisco. The individual received these after the account was closed. Then, there was a printout of the flight reservations. It was notable that the tickets were round-trip, while the wife's were only one-way. This information is sufficient for me to cancel their tickets. I had another idea. I would separate the couple by moving Jens to the rear of the aircraft and occupying his seat myself. After conducting further research, I consulted the Chicago Tribune archives and discovered the reason behind Jensen's use of a fictitious name. He was a previously convicted female offender originally from Chicago. All 3 daily newspapers had published his photograph. He was accused of assaulting an individual in Denver. Due to a plea agreement, the details of the case were not widely disseminated. However, he ultimately pleaded guilty to a lesser charge and was sentenced to 2 years in prison. His wife filed for divorce while he was incarcerated. A review of the offender registry revealed that he resided at an address that also indicated he was released early from prison due to overcrowding. His first action upon release was to locate his former spouse. He subsequently assaulted his wife with such severity that she was compelled to seek medical attention for a period of almost 1 month, resulting in 2 felony convictions. Despite this, my wife continues to regard him as an amiable individual. I proceeded to take an early lunch break and proceeded to the courthouse with the intention of procuring a copy of Jensen's divorce papers. The cost for photocopies was 25 cents per page. The filing included a copy of his arrest warrant for a woman offense, namely the drugging of a young woman while skiing and subsequent offense against her. In addition, I conducted research into the possibility of filing for divorce independently. At the law library, I located an appropriate template online and completed the requisite fields. I cited adultery as the reason for the divorce and attached time-stamped photographs of the couple engaged in romantic conversation in the cafeteria for an hour. My final destination was the Domestic Relations Division of the Circuit Court, where I filed the necessary paperwork for the divorce. I received 3 copies of the documents, stamped with the official seal and a case number. I informed my supervisor that I required a few personal days off, and he did not inquire further. Upon returning home, I proceeded to prepare a meal, rather than a pre-prepared one. It can be assumed that she was attempting to make me happy. I embraced and kissed her, to which she responded that it was not as satisfying as she had hoped, but still better than nothing. She then produced a folded document from her purse. "Here is the information you requested," she said. "John Johnson does not have a telephone, but I was able to locate his email address, and he is on Facebook. Could you please tell me where he works? He has received a promotion, but he has not yet received his new business cards." Upon hearing that he was unable to provide the address of his workplace, I regarded her assertion as implausible. I accessed my laptop and utilized Google Maps, entering the chalet address. This proved unsuccessful. I then attempted to utilize the Denver zoning maps, but this was also ineffective. I then employed a multitude of alternative mapping programs, yet none of them yielded any results. I proceeded to contact the relevant authorities, who confirmed that the address in question was indeed unrecognized. The system failed to recognize the address. She suggested that perhaps the address had been entered incorrectly. He replied that they would receive tickets at the airport. However, it is common knowledge that boarding passes are distributed at the airport. This information was learned from a recent trip to Maui. The phone numbers provided for the other 2 couples were unsuccessful when called. Online searches and Facebook yielded no results. It is unfortunate to report that none of the information provided by Johnson was accurate. If that is indeed his real name, there is no way I am going to let you go. I had thought that she might admit that something was amiss with Johnson, but instead, my dinner flew across the room and hit the wall. "You are not going to stop me," she screamed. "Who are you to control where I go?" she demanded. "I am your husband," he replied. "Why are you being so stubborn?" "I am just worried about you going skiing with the man who has lied about everything. You do not even know where you are going," she said. "He did not," he replied. "Perhaps he is fearful that you will cause him difficulties. Is he concerned that I might disrupt his plans?" Jeanette became visibly upset. She spoke rapidly, her words coming out in a stream of consciousness. "Stop suggesting that we will never be more than friends. I am going skiing, and you cannot stop me." "Fine, go skiing, but how will you afford it? We are financially unstable. I have been saving silver coins since I was a teenager. I have 2 jars full of them. I was saving them for a getaway for us. On the occasion of our 5th anniversary, I shall redeem the coins and either embark on a joint vacation or use the funds to retain the services of a divorce attorney. The decision is yours. I am not threatening you, I am making a promise, and you are aware that I am a man of my word. I am at a loss as to why you do not repose trust in me. Johnson has not demonstrated the qualities of a gentleman by failing to withdraw when he discovered that I am married. I informed you that he is accompanying me solely because the ticket is non-refundable. The ticket is refundable, and I will reimburse him for it. This will still leave sufficient funds for us to go skiing. However, the opportunity has already passed. We are leaving tomorrow morning, and I am unable to contact him. Jeanette, I am not naive. I will not be deceived by you. Any man who would allow his wife to do what you want her to do, in other words, any man who thinks of himself as a real man, ought to consider how he will explain his actions to others. To your family and friends, I implore you to refrain from inquiring about the circumstances surrounding our divorce. I have promised to return to you relaxed and to make amends. I beseech you, it is not too late to salvage our marriage. I have informed you that I am unable to cancel. I have committed to John that I would attend, and it is now too late for him to secure the services of another individual, so you will remain in possession of I promised him at the expense of the vows we made in front of God and our families. I have repeatedly informed you that nothing will occur. Regardless of the outcome, you have made your decision, you have selected him over our marriage. I spent the night on the couch, and I heard Jeanette crying in the bedroom. My mind was conflicted. In weighing the options, the logical and rational mind urged me to let her face the consequences and revel in it later, while the emotional side urged me to be the knight in shining armor and save our marriage. I spent a sleepless night wrestling with my thoughts. Eventually, I decided on a compromise. I woke up before dawn, but Jeanette she ignored me and became angry when I took a picture of her with my phone. She demanded, "Why did you do that?" I replied, and she responded with a string of curses as she packed her suitcase. I entered the bedroom. "If you board that plane with him, don't," I warned. "I expect you to be here when you return. If you leave with him, our marriage will be over." I warned her, but she shot me a dirty look and retorted, "I know you're not that foolish." I thought the same about her. I replied before leaving without kissing her goodbye. I parked my car down the block and watched her leave. Then I returned home and shaved. I removed my facial hair and grooming accessories, donned a black suit with a white shirt and tie, and considered this my funeral attire, symbolizing the demise of our marriage. I added sunglasses to complete my disguise, grabbed my briefcase and suitcases packed with clothes, and proceeded to the airport for one final attempt. I was at the gate when Julio contacted me at 8 p.m. He informed me of a significant disagreement between Jeanette and Jensen outside his apartment. Despite her proposal to pay for parking, he insisted they take the subway, claiming it was more cost-effective and that they would require the funds in Colorado while she was in the bathroom. I reviewed her wallet and discovered that she had less than $1. I observed that she had $100 in her possession. It is possible that she was intending to use our joint credit cards, as I had already cancelled them after purchasing my ticket. I considered it a fortunate circumstance that I was unable to read Jeanette's thoughts, as she proceeded to lug her bags down the stairs to the dimly lit subway, which is colloquially known as the dark underground labyrinth by Chicagoans. The Blue Line train would be crowded with commuters heading to work. Julio noted the peculiarity of a man flying to Denver for skiing in December lacking a proper winter coat or even gloves, as he observed them getting pushed. The journey, which had commenced approximately half an hour previously, was already in jeopardy. Julio followed them into the terminal and observed Jensen printing their boarding passes. Fortunately, he did not subject them to close scrutiny and had not noticed that I had changed his seat assignment just before purchasing my ticket. Julio called again to inform me that they had reached the TSA checkpoint, which meant that we could not follow them any further. I thanked him for his assistance and expressed my gratitude to the screener at the X-ray machine. The X-ray machine flagged Jeanette's carry-on, prompting the TSA worker to instruct her to step over. He proceeded to search her belongings, locating a cork hidden in the inside zipper pocket. This was a deliberate act on my part, carried out while searching her bags earlier to ascertain the contents. The TSA agent then admonished her and confiscated the cork, to my relief, as it appeared to be an innocuous item. The timing of events had to be precisely orchestrated for the success of my plan. I had secured an early boarding pass and one of the first seats on the aircraft. I took the center seat, leaving the window seat for my wife. I then offered her a second chance to sit next to me, should she so desire, so that I could present my evidence. Fortunately, the man with the aisle seat boarded a couple of minutes later. The man in the aisle seat was a young adult, presumably a college student, based on the surrounding conversation. Gradually, the row ahead of us filled up as latecomers searched for space to stow their carry-on bags in the overhead bins. A few minutes later, the situation escalated. "You're in my seat," Jensen stated, thrusting his ticket into his neighbor's face. Jeanette, preoccupied with her belongings, turned to the commotion. The man in the aisle seat pointed out that the row number was incorrect, indicating that she should be seated further back, near the bathrooms. Jensen began to berate the airline's incompetence and demanded to sit next to his girlfriend. Jeanette heard him refer to her but remained silent. Instead, she suggested that John, who had refused to move, should switch seats with the man in the middle. My facial hair, namely my beard and mustache, enabled Jeanette to recognize me with greater alacrity. I was also wearing sunglasses, which aided this process. Meanwhile, a flight attendant had made her way through the crowd, emerging from the aft galley, to address the disturbance. She called out to Jensen and ordered him to take his seat so that they could complete the boarding process. This flight was fully booked, so she insisted that he take his assigned seat. She said that they would see if any changes could be made after takeoff. Jensen persisted, waving his ticket. Jeanette finally noticed me in the center seat. What are you doing on my flight?" she demanded, her voice laced with anger. "You orchestrated this to embarrass me." "I'm not the one humiliating you," I replied, my own voice betraying my irritation. "It's not my place to call you my girlfriend." She moved to the empty row in front and continued, her tone now stripped of any trace of civility. She proceeded to berate me, stating that I had ruined her vacation and expressing hatred for me and for being married to me. I had anticipated her anger, but her words felt like a stab to my soul. I was stunned, feeling like I had lost her, and grabbed my briefcase. I was about to leave the plane when something unexpected occurred. Jensen forcefully brandished his ticket, and, on impulse, I seized it from him. My voice trembled as I demanded to know the name on the ticket. I showed it to Jeanette, who was confused. She replied, "John." Jensen snatched the ticket back and crumpled it, claiming there was no name on it. The flight attendant intervened, urging us to take our seats. Jensen persisted, insisting on his seat next to his girlfriend. His disrespectful words about my wife brought me back to reality, and tears welled. As I looked at Jeanette and revealed Jensen's true identity, I handed her a copy of the bench warrant, which explained that Jensen, her supposed boyfriend, had an outstanding warrant for failing to pay child support. He could afford a vacation because he had neglected his own children. Opening my briefcase, I passed her the document, saying, "You should take a look at this." I then handed her the document, and her voice shook as she asked, "John, what's happening? Is that true? While you're at it, ask your boyfriend why he didn't buy you a..." I provided her with the return ticket, which showed that her ticket was one way. Jeanette became increasingly concerned. She asked John why she did not have a return ticket. He ignored her and continued to argue with the flight attendant. He had spent 2 years in jail for beating his wife so badly that she was hospitalized for almost a month. I provided her with photographs of the injuries the woman had sustained. I informed Jeanette that I had evidence that this man was not who he claimed to be. She pleaded with John to confirm that the allegations were untrue, but he remained silent. Jeanette was focused on John's argument with the flight attendant. She insisted, "You need to make him move, or else." She then continued, "You'd be amazed what you can find by Googling someone's real name." She provided newspaper stories to prove her point. She showed him several articles with his mugshot. She asked, "Does this sound familiar?" She recounted how John had convinced a young woman to go skiing in Colorado. He had drugged and offended her, she said. The plane was quiet as Jeanette broke into tears. John was too occupied to reply. He was engaged in a heated exchange with the flight attendant and did not respond. I suggested that Jensen might not have been the most astute individual, but it seemed to finally register with him. He yelled, "I'm going to kill you," and lunged at me, but his punch instead, he landed on the flight attendant's face. When I dodged, chaos erupted in the narrow aisle. My seatmate, who was a starting defensive tackle at a Big Ten college, swiftly restrained him until the police handcuffed him. He was hailed as a hero, and the airline upgraded him to first class as a reward. Despite Jensen's assertion that he intended to strike me, not the flight attendant, he was charged with a felony for offending a flight crew member. The police were unmoved by his excuse. I provided Jeanette with all the evidence I had gathered. I attest to the veracity of these statements. I informed Jeanette of the situation. She studied the document silently, and I could sense her reluctance to engage. I suggested that we should let Jensen leave and return home. However, she remained silent, gazing at the floor. As Jensen was escorted off the plane by the police, the situation escalated. He continued to shout, "I have your wife," and I could see the distress in his eyes. Jeanette initially denied it, but she turned away silently. An airline security guard informed us that we were being handed over to the Chicago Police Department for our involvement in the incident before we boarded. I overheard a flight attendant announcing, "Let the gate agent know, 3 seats just became available." I silently thanked the heavens as we walked through the cabin. I felt the stares of the other passengers, their cell phones snapping pictures like crazy. Jeanette experienced a taste of real humiliation, not a word escaped her lips. During the subsequent walk, it appeared as though she was taken unawares. I, too, was in a state of shock. My knees felt weak, yet I forced myself to maintain my composure and continue walking with my head held high. I wanted everyone to know that I had done everything within my power. The plan had worked almost perfectly, except that I had saved Jeanette but lost my wife. The police separated us for questioning, and even Homeland Security was involved. I spent an hour recounting everything about Jensen, and then they left me alone with a cup of stale coffee for 2 hours while they contacted their colleagues in Denver. I paced. Like a caged animal, I was consumed by the fate of my marriage. Did my wife betray me with Jensen, or was he lying to tear us apart? If she didn't do it, why didn't she defend herself? These questions, among others, continued to plague me when the detective returned. He revealed that they found evidence in Colorado. My wife was visibly distressed when she saw the images of the dilapidated shack where Jensen planned to take her with his 4 accomplices. They had set up the shack with restraints and chains to prevent anyone from escaping. We discovered the detective informed me that sufficient sedatives had been hidden in the suspect's bag to knock out an elephant for a week. It was relatively simple to persuade the suspects to divulge their plan for the next victim. The detective stated that my wife would not have survived the encounter. She appeared pale as the suspects confessed their intentions, and then she passed out cold when the suspect finished. The detective suggested that I speak with my wife alone. It was not a suggestion, it was more like an order. I replied, "Yes, sir." I unlocked my briefcase and pulled out the divorce papers. I informed Jeanette that I would divorce her if she boarded the plane with Jensen. He inquired with astonishment if I lacked compassion. He continued, expressing shock at the imminent danger she had faced. I was still reeling from the realization that she had come perilously close to death. He advised me to hand her the divorce papers, emphasizing that doing so would destroy her. I remained unmoved, as the part of me that loved her had vanished. She was acutely aware of her misdeed. "You are the hero," he said, lauding my role in orchestrating the rescue of my wife. "You are like a hero," he continued, emphasizing the gravity of my actions. "You cannot abandon her. I intend to present these to her at their usual meeting place." I acknowledged that, given the circumstances and despite Jeanette's actions, would consider apologizing if she expressed remorse. However, I remain committed to pursuing a divorce. "I guarantee that you will be informed of my decision." A short time later, I was joined by my wife. I caught a brief glimpse of her before she covered her face with her hands. She appeared distressed and had a strong odor of vomit. She sank into a chair and began to cry. The detective stood over her and addressed her as Mrs. Dear Sir/Madam. "I have been a police officer for over 29 years, and I must say that your actions were the most foolish I have ever heard of. If anyone deserved to be killed, it was you. You should be grateful for your husband and every heartbeat he gave you. You owe him for the rest of your life." He left the room and closed the door behind him. There was silence except for my wife's sobs. She did not speak a single word, offer any kind of apology or expression of regret. After about 5 minutes, I grew tired of waiting for her to speak. "You sacrificed our marriage for a skiing trip that cost less than $1,000. Yours sincerely." Sender's name, the value of our hopes was $500. "How can I ever trust you not to leave me for the next object of desire?" I begged her to say something, but she remained silent. Tears streamed down my face as I waited for her to respond. When I couldn't bear it any longer, I said, if you had said at any juncture, I would have voided this document. I am unable to endure further delay. I provided her with a copy of the dissolution of marriage papers. Jeanette's exclamation of distress prompted the detective to hasten back into the room. I have already packed my belongings and am prepared for the possibility of further departure. You are at liberty to donate or discard these items as you see fit. I surrendered the keys, informing her that I was relinquishing my claim to the apartment. Our next encounter took place in the courtroom, where the judge mandated counseling for us, though I complied reluctantly, as reconciliation was never part of my agenda. Throughout the sessions, the counselor witnessed the irrationality of my ex. As anticipated, the counseling proved ineffective, resulting in our official divorce after 7 months. Thereafter, I had no further contact with Jeanette, nor did I desire to. Jensen was charged with conspiracy and is currently serving a sentence. I can only hope that he remains incarcerated indefinitely.